I grew up in the generation, teeny bopper in the 60s and 70s where, the commitment was very real and you lived it from day to day. When it came to civil rights, for example, you could not sit on the sidelines and wait for something to happen. We were 14, 15, 16 years old and going to marches because that was what we had to do. And our parents were there too, and it was something that was very, very real. I think it's a little bit different today where there's a almost volunteer, you can volunteer or not volunteer to be involved in issues. You can pick your particular issues. So it's very different. We had to be committed because our lives were on the line in my generation.
It's interesting. I think a lot of times current and modern day athletes are reluctant to get involved in issues because they're making so much money from a salary perspective and don't want to rock the boat. And so the times that you do start to see athletes get involved is because something has happened to them personally. Like at my team a couple of years ago, one of our players, Thabo Cephalosha, had an incident in New York City where he encountered a police officer and it ended up becoming a physical altercation where he was injured. He couldn't play in the playoffs. I mean, it was awful. And so he ended up suing the city of New York, and it was a bad time. And so it was in the midst of all of this stuff happening in the United States with Black men and law enforcement officers and all of the rhetoric around, Black Lives Matter. And so Thabo used his platform as an NBA player to bring light to the fact that there are some injustices that are going on. And I think that it was certainly, at least in the Atlanta market, because that's where he was playing at the time, I think that people were listening, and I think that particularly millennial youth were engaged, and you saw a lot of rhetoric on social media about what took place and what should be happening next. And so I think at times athletes get involved. It's because they've been personally impacted and affected by this stuff. But I feel like back in Edwin's time, athletes were a lot more proactive about speaking up. When you think about the Muhammad Ali's of the world, or even Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who was way before Kaepernick in the NBA, who kneeled during the anthem. This stuff is not new. It's just getting a lot more attention because social media makes things easier to consume across the board.
We are going through, as you think about immigration again, 30% of our players are Latino. So, we've got two of our superstar athletes that are Venezuelan. So when you start to think about the challenges that are arising in Venezuela, those guys are using their platforms to be able to shed light on immigration issues that are happening here in the States, but also what's happening overseas. And what we found for our fan base is rallying around those guys here in the city because they are going through either them or their family members are going through the same challenges. And so I think to Zing's point, when it's personal, people are using their platforms to be able to communicate the issues that are out there. So I think that that's raising the awareness definitely on issues. I do think what will be interesting is to see as trendsetters like LeBron and Chris Paul and some of those start to transition out of the game, what then happens? And then who takes that next step in really leading the charge on social issues? And that's where I think it will get really interesting because they really set a foundation and that foundation to allow athletes to feel comfortable in being able to express themselves both in public spaces, in media, being disruptive, and how they do that. It will be interesting to see how that continues to evolve.
I think personally that it's the responsibility of an athlete to whom much is given. There is an expectation that they represent their communities in a way, Now, the way that they do that is up to them. And I know that that oftentimes is a third rail. Well, how is it that you can tell people what they're supposed to do with their platform? I don't think that you tell people what to do with their platform, but you do demand that people who have a platform to use it. And I think that it becomes very encouraging the ways that the NBA, Major League Baseball, WNBA, and I think even the NFL have responded to the athletes, right? The Players Coalition is such an important group of leaders that are looking at how it is that they can better their community and how it is that they're educating themselves about how it is that they can be change agents. So my hope and expectation is that this wave will continue. And I also think that folks who say, well, I really don't want a lot of that. I just want to come and kind of see you play. I think that's a very naive expectation, and I think it's fundamentally disrespectful to the people that are a part of the community as players.